For centuries, the mighty Roman legions dominated the ancient world. Their name conjures images of disciplined soldiers, towering shields, and gleaming swords, an unstoppable force in close-quarters combat. But this image raises a fascinating question, one that many history buffs have pondered. Did the Romans actually use archers, or did they truly conquer the world with just infantry and grit? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden history of Roman archery. We'll trace the journey of the bow and arrow, from a weapon dismissed as cowardly to one of Rome's most critical assets for survival. So, get ready to uncover a side of Roman warfare you've never seen before. In the early days of the Republic, Roman military doctrine was built on a simple, powerful belief: a true warrior fights face to face. Close combat wasn't just a tactic. It was a matter of cultural pride, a demonstration of courage and discipline. The idea of shooting at an enemy from a distance was seen as, well, un-Roman. They looked at the bow as the weapon of their rivals, the Greeks, various Eastern nations, or anyone they felt lacked the stomach for a direct fight. So, if you looked at a typical early Republican army, you'd see a very clear structure. You had the heavy infantry, the famous legionaries, forming the backbone of the army. You had the velites, skirmishers, who would throw javelins to disrupt enemy formations before the main clash. And you had the cavalry, used for scouting and flanking. But archers, they were almost completely absent. Any bowmen present were usually foreign mercenaries, hired hands from other lands. Rome simply did untrain its own citizens to be archers because the bow was considered an unworthy weapon. It was a tool for auxiliaries, not for a proper Roman soldier. But as Rome's borders expanded, this rigid mindset was destined to collide with a harsh reality. The world was a lot bigger than Italy, and not everyone fought by Roman rules. As Rome pushed east and south, they encountered cultures where archery wasn't just a support role. It was the heart of warfare. Nations like the Cretans, Syrians, and other peoples of the Near East were masters of the bow, trained from childhood to be deadly accurate from a distance. Rome learned a crucial lesson, and they learned it fast. Foreigners were simply better at archery than they were. So, if you can't beat them, hire them. The Roman army began to massively supplement its legions with specialized foreign troops. Cretan archers, renowned for their skill, became a common sight. They also recruited Syrian and Anatolian auxiliaries, who brought their own traditions of powerful archery to the battlefield. And while not archers, the famous Balearic slingers served a similar purpose, delivering lethal projectiles from a distance with terrifying precision. These specialists were fast, agile, and experts at hit-and-run tactics. They could harass and weaken an enemy army long before the legionaries even drew their swords. Suddenly, the Roman way of war wasn't always enough. When facing an enemy that was nimble, skilled at long-range attacks, and refused to engage in a straightforward infantry battle, the slow-moving, heavily armored legions were at a huge disadvantage. And then came the battle that would serve as a brutal, unforgettable wake-up call for the entire Roman Empire. The year is 53 BC. The place is Carrhae, in modern-day Turkey. A massive Roman army, led by the ambitious general Crassus, marched confidently into Parthian territory. What happened next was a military disaster of epic proportions. The Parthians were not an enemy the Romans were used to. Their primary strength was their horse archers. These weren't just men with bows on horseback. They were a completely different kind of warrior. They used advanced composite bows, more flexible, yet incredibly powerful weapons that could shoot armor-piercing arrows over long distances, all while riding at high speed. The Roman legionaries were helpless. They formed their famous shield walls, the testudo formation, to protect themselves from the endless rain of arrows. But they couldn't advance. Every time they tried to charge, the Parthian horsemen would simply retreat, firing backwards as they rode away in their famous Parthian shot. The Romans couldn't catch them, and they couldn't fight back effectively. They were slowly, methodically, and brutally picked apart from a distance. The Battle of Carrhae was a terrible lesson, but it was one Rome would never forget. It exposed a fundamental weakness in their military machine. Without an effective counter to long-ranged archery, the invincible legions were, in fact, very vulnerable. Rome had to change, or it would perish. Following the disaster at Carrhae, the Roman military underwent a profound transformation, especially from the 1st century AD onward. The old prejudice against the bow and arrow began to fade, replaced by a pragmatic understanding of its necessity. Rome started to formalize its archery corps, creating its own permanent archery regiments. These were primarily auxiliary units, often recruited from provinces famous for their archery traditions. But they were now a fully integrated and disciplined part of the Roman army, under Roman command. New units with names like cohorts Sagittariorum, which literally means archer cohort, became standard. Entire regiments of Syrian archers, Palmyrene archers, and even Armenian horse archers were established. The Roman high command finally understood the bow's true potential. It was a weapon to soften up and break enemy lines before a legionary charge. It was essential for defending the empire's vast frontiers against mobile raiders. It was the perfect counter to enemy archers. It provided crucial long-range support in siege warfare, picking off defenders on castle walls. The bow was no longer a minor, almost shameful, part of the army. It had become a vital pillar of Roman military strategy. Now, let's talk a little about the technology that made this evolution possible. The Romans didn't just adopt archery, they adopted the best archery technology available. The most effective bow of the era was the composite bow, a marvel of ancient engineering. Unlike a simple wooden self-bow, a composite bow was made from layers of different materials. It had a wooden core, a layer of animal horn on the belly, the side facing the archer, and a layer of animal sinew on the back. This layered construction created incredible tension when the bow was drawn. The horn resisted compression, and the sinew resisted stretching, storing a massive amount of energy. The result was a bow that was much more powerful than a simple wooden bow of the same size. It had a longer range, greater velocity, and its arrows could penetrate armor far more effectively. This made it the perfect weapon for both infantry archers and, crucially, for horse archers. The Romans even began to field armored archers, who wore scale or lamella armor, allowing them to stand in the line of fire and exchange volleys with the enemy without being completely exposed. As the centuries wore on, the importance of archery in the Roman army only grew. By the late Empire, a new and terrifying enemy appeared on the horizon. The Huns, these nomadic warriors from the steppes, were masters of horse archery, even more formidable than the Parthians had been. As the Huns swept into Europe, bringing chaos and destruction, the Romans knew that their traditional legions, with swords and shields, stood no chance alone against this new type of warfare. The Roman military had to adapt once more, this time even more radically. To counter the Hunnic threat, they heavily invested in their own fast-moving horse archers. They developed powerful, Eastern-style heavy cavalry and created more flexible, mobile armies that could respond quickly to raids. By the 4th and 5th centuries AD, archers were a ubiquitous presence throughout the Roman army. You would find them garrisoning forts on the frontier, serving in the elite field armies, and fighting in every major campaign. In fact, many historians argue that one of the key reasons the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as Byzantium, survived for another 1,000 years was its full embrace and mastery of advanced cavalry and archery tactics. So, to answer our original question, did the Romans use archers? The answer is a definitive yes. But the story is one of evolution and adaptation. The early Romans, proud of their hand-to-hand martial prowess, initially shunned the bow. But as they faced formidable, long-range enemies, like the Parthians, the Persians, and the Huns, they were forced to learn, to change, and to integrate this once despised weapon into their military. The bow's journey within the Roman army mirrors the journey of Rome itself, a story of pragmatism and survival. It went from being a neglected tool of mercenaries to a vital support weapon, and finally, to a major force that was essential for the empire's continued existence. In the end, Rome survived for as long as it did because it learned how to change with the times. And it proves that sometimes, the weapon you once dismissed as cowardly can become the very thing that saves you. The quietest weapon, a single arrow, can indeed change the fate of an empire. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden side of Roman history, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.